So, if weight loss feels like an uphill battle and you're not alone, most people think they need to make massive changes to see results. But what if I told you that that actually makes it harder? Today, I'm sharing three micro changes that can shift weight loss from feeling overwhelming to completely doable. These aren't about restriction or willpower, they're about working with your body's natural rhythms so you finally stop fighting yourself and start seeing the results you want. Let's dive in. Okay, so welcome to Joyful Eating, episode number 232. And today we're talking about the three micro changes that make weight loss feel doable. But before we get to that, the best bite I had, so this on Tuesday night, I made a sausage supper. So this is like one of my favorite meals of all time. It's like basically a sheet pan meal where you put some sausages and some veggies and then put it in the oven. And this week I used some Italian pork sausages. And when I went to the markets, there was fennel it was on special. So it's coming in winter, so fennel season here. So I sliced up the fennel and put that on the tray with the sausages and roasted it. And roast fennel, it was like such a revelation. I'd forgotten how good it is. And then while that was cooking, I made a little, what I call a chunky salsa. So basically, it's a vinaigrette. So I used lemon juice and olive oil, but then I chopped up some feta and stirred that through. And I finally chopped up the leafy fronds from the fennel plant and stirred that through and just let that sit while the sausages were cooking. And then I served it with, the boys had wraps with theirs and they had, Burgle had ketchup with his. But my Irishman and I had this feta salsa with our sausages, and I served some greens as like some cos lettuce from the garden as well. So you had that crunch, we had the roast fennel, we had the sausage, and it was just like, yeah, we were actually, yeah, normally we're not fighting over the over the last, but I was like, oh, is there any more? Is there more of the salsa? Is there more? And he was like, no, hang on, there's no more salsa here. Yeah, so it's really good. So yeah, feta is such a magic ingredient. Okay, so in this episode, first of all, we'll talk about the story behind this episode, why I thought I'd share it. And then we'll look at these three micro changes that make weight loss feel doable. And then I've got a bonus tip to actually a couple of bonus tips to help you to help you avoid the most common mistakes that people make with these micro changes. So, story behind this episode is one of the people in the Naturally Healthy Cupboard shared a post in our group talking about her, 24 hours. It was called 24 Hours of Wins. And she was just went through her day and about how she just, it felt easy, like just for her to eat in this way that felt balanced. She was listening to her body and she wasn't feeling deprived or anything. And it felt really good. And I was, yes. And so often people are posting about, oh, actually, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So I was like, yeah, I thought to myself, let's do a podcast episode on how do we, because there's such a narrative, and actually so many people's like our experience in the culturally is that weight loss is this hard thing. And actually there are a few things that when we shift those and make some small changes, the weight loss starts to happen almost on its own. And yeah, is it fast? No, but is it sustainable and slow and and easy, doable? Absolutely. So the three micro changes that I wanted to share with you today, of course, there are others as well, but the first one is slowing down when you're eating. And so, why that makes a difference is, first of all, you get more enjoyment. If you're shoveling in your food, there's hardly any time that the food's in contact with your taste buds. And so you're really missing out on actually getting that pleasure and that sensory experience of eating the food. So by slowing down, you give yourself an opportunity to enjoy your food more. And then as a bonus, also the thing is, like, when we slow down, because we're getting more enjoyment, it's actually easier to feel satisfied without having to eat buckets loads and bucket loads of food. So we get that sense of satisfaction earlier, so we're able to not overeat because we feel satisfied because we've slowed down. So, how do we go about doing this, slowing down when eating? So, the tiny habit that I teach people in the Naturally Healthy Club, very simple, is just putting your cutlery or your utensils, you're using chopsticks. So, if you're eating a burger, just putting the burger down in between bites. And how this slows you down is that, so if you've got food in your mouth, you should be chewing and enjoying the food and focusing on the food, not loading up the next bite. And then when you've swallowed, then picking up a cutlery and getting the next bite ready. And so it just slows down the cadence of how you're eating. And it may seem like such a small thing, but do an experiment with yourself and try it. And you'll be amazed at how much more satisfying your meal feels and how much more enjoyable it is as well. So that's the first change that I really recommend experimenting with. It's so much more fun. And actually, I will say with that yes, there will be times where I don't eat slowly because, whatever reason, I'm rushed. I've got to get somewhere. Usually at lunchtime, that tends to be my meal that gets compacted. And that's okay. You don't have to do this for every single meal. However, when you are able to give yourself that gift of time and slow down, it's so worth it to do. So you don't have to do that one perfectly. Actually, you don't have to do any of this perfectly. So then micro change number 2 is just being more intentional with your eating. So rather than just eating on autopilot and not bringing much conscious thought into what's going into your mouth, actually pausing and making more intentional choices. And why this is helpful is because it helps you make better decisions. So then you're able to, just make your decisions based on, yes, what feels good in the moment, but also what's going to feel good, a few hours later. So you're less likely to overeat and eat things that don't make you feel good. And of course, when you eat less overeating and less overeating of the things that don't make you feel good, that when you're eating less of those things, then of course the weight loss naturally follows. And so the way to how do we go about being more intentional? How do we go about bringing more rational thought into our food experiences? So the micro change that I recommend here is just pausing whenever you're about to interact with food. So say you're about to go into a restaurant or someone's handed you a donut, just pausing it and asking yourself, do I want this? And just having that little check-in with yourself of like, oh yeah, I do want this donut, amazing, go ahead and proceed. But if the thought is actually, no, I don't, or maybe not so much, or I only need half, then you can make that intentional choice in the moment. So yeah, pausing and checking in with yourself of, do I want this? Or if it's, you're about to go to a restaurant and it's not one specific thing, then pausing there and asking yourself, how do I want this to go? And just getting a little bit of an intention in your brain of like, oh, I want to enjoy it, but I don't want to roll out of here feeling gross. And either of those questions, do I want this or how do I want this to go, are great questions for bringing that rational brain, bringing your intentional brain into your experiences with food. And you can do that before you start eating, but you can also do it in the middle of having things. So I often use that do I want this question? Like if I find myself, long story, but so I won't go into all the details, but actually the other day I found myself in the kitchen slicing up a piece of butter from the block and eating butter. And then I was just paused and went, hang on, do I even want this? And I was like, no, what am I doing? And so it just helped me stop that behavior in the moment and make a more conscious choice. Actually, the butter story would be a good one for a future episode. I'll have to make a note to share that one. Okay, and then the third micro change that can really make a difference is being intentional with your serving sizes. So actually serving yourself less. So of course, why this works is because most of us just eat what's on our plate and then, that's the end of the meal. And so if you're more intentional with the actual quantity of food that goes onto your plate, you're more likely to eat less but also you'll still feel satisfied because you get to the end of your plate and you've already trained yourself that, oh, that's enough food. And this makes such a difference. And I've worked with some people over the years in the Naturally Healthy Club, and that's the only change they've made is just like being more intentional with their serving sizes. And it's shifted a lot of weight. And I actually interviewed Tracy for one of the earlier episodes on joyful eating, and she'd realized as we were working together that she had the habit of serving herself and her husband the exact same amount of food. And he was over 6 foot and she was 5 foot. And so when she just went, oh, hang on, maybe actually I don't need that much. And she changed her serving sizes, that shifted a heap of weight for her just from making that one micro change. So how do you go about doing that? It's just a decision of deciding to experiment with your serving sizes. And important thing to do with this is don't be telling yourself, oh, I'm having this smaller serve, it's not going to be satisfying, and thinking that it's not going to be enough. Actually, when you are serving, yes, it's less food than you would normally serve, but actually letting yourself look at it and think, well, that's still that looks like a lot of food. I'm probably going to feel satisfied with this. And when you approach it from that way, then you're likely to feel satisfied at the end. And of course, if you're not satisfied at the end of that smaller serve, give yourself permission to go back and get more. You don't want to have the restriction going on there. But if you are feeling satisfied, great, move on with your day. Okay, and so my bonus tip, I think one of the common mistakes is when you come across new ideas like that, it's like feeling like you have to implement everything all at once and trying to do too much and then getting overwhelmed and not really actually implementing anything. So my invitation to you to overcome that block is just to choose one new habit to focus on this week. So one of these micro changes. So you might like to choose slowing down and putting that cutlery down, or you might like to choose that being intentional habit, or you might like to experiment with your serving sizes, but just choose one of them, knowing that you can come back to the others in the future, and that even one of these habits is enough to change your relationship with food and change how much you're eating, and therefore get the weight to move. Okay, so if you'd like some help implementing these and the other micro changes that make weight loss feel doable, so you become someone who eats what you want and feels good in your clothes again, then come and play with us in the Naturally Healthy Club. So we enroll twice a year. So check out the link in the show notes for more details. Okay, have a beautiful week experimenting with your micro change, and I'll see you next week. Bye.